Exodus. Still in lesson 1, we're Exodus chapter 2, as we are discussing now Moses and the children of Israel have left Egypt. Rather, they are preparing to leave Egypt. They are slaves there. They have been enslaved. And so now their cries, because of their burdens, have come up before the Lord. And the Lord is going to raise up a leader who is going to lead his people out of bondage. And he's going to really come from an unexpected place at an unexpected time. It is going to be at a time where Pharaoh has said, because of the explosion of the people, the population explosion, Pharaoh's going to say, you demand that all the baby boys, Hebrew baby boys, be killed. And actually, of course, they couldn't even comply with that because the babies came so quickly that they couldn't even do that. God was with them. But it is during this period of time where that is the edict of Pharaoh, that this young boy came into the world and just had the most unexpected life. And he ultimately he became history's greatest civic leader. History's greatest civic leader. And that, of course, is Moses. Moses needed a lot of preparation. That's the thing that, unfortunately, many of us, we want to get to life quickly and get things started and get things done quickly, not realizing that it takes a lot of preparation before we can actually be used by the Lord. Sometimes we can see that in our own lives. Sometimes we see that in the lives of others. But God is preparing us through our lives as we go through life, living it for Him. He's preparing us for something greater. And so we read last week, Exodus chapter 2, verse 1, that there was a man from the tribe of Levi. He says the house here, but he's from the tribe of Levi. And not only was he from the tribe of Levi, but he took a daughter, that is his wife, Jochebed. She is from Levi as well. And of course, it doesn't, in Exodus chapter 2, doesn't mention that, hey, there's already an older brother and sister here, but we know that there is an older brother or sister. And yet, it starts off with the birth of Moses. And what did she do? After Moses was born, she hid him for 3 months. And of course, she's here as an infant, and infants need their mothers, obviously for sustenance and for care as they continue to grow, and to have that bond that is between newborns and their mothers. And so Moses needed that as well. But then when she could hide him no longer, in verse 3, she built an ark of bulrushes. Now, what does ark mean? Box. That's all that it means. It just means it's a box. So she took reeds and made a box out of these reeds. And obviously you could do that. We could go out to, I remember playing out there in, it happened to be Redwater, Texas. We had a culvert there in between the house and the church building, and it was always filled with water. Always filled with water. What came out of there? Big old, we call them cattails. what cattails are. And so, those are pretty, the cattails have, pretty big reeds. And so we did all kind of stuff with that, built all kind of stuff with those reeds. And so that's exactly what Jochebed did here, is she built a little, we would call it a basket, and she, of course, if you're going to put somebody in it, you're going to have to seal it up. That's what she did. She sealed it up with slime and pitch, and then she put Moses in there, and then she put it in there with the reeds there in the river. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean the Nile River. It could have been a tributary of the Nile, but no doubt it was a body of water. It was a river. And, of course, now we have an introduction of Miriam in verse 4. She's not mentioned right this second, but that's who she is, because his sister hid and watched what was going to happen. She stood afar off to know what's going to be done to him. And would the Lord had it that the daughter of Pharaoh, in verse 5, came down to bathe. And of course, the daughter of Pharaoh, does she go and bathe all by herself? No. No, she's got her security team with her. She has all of her ladies with her. And so there are a number of people here, and she sees Moses. And of course, she didn't go get him, did she? No, because when you're the Pharaoh's daughter, you get your maid to go get see what's going on. And so the maid went and got Moses, and when Pharaoh's daughter opened up, verse 6, when she opened up that box, because it was closed, she opened it up, and here is a Hebrew boy, and he's crying here. And she, of course, had compassion, because she's a very nice lady, and she had compassion, and she knew already what this was. She said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. This is a lady who's trying to save her son alive. And she could have been wicked and said, my dad said that all the Hebrew boys were to be put to death. Couldn't she? I mean, she knew what the edict was. It wasn't a secret. And instead, she said, I'm going to save this one. And so her heartstrings were tugged on by the baby Moses. And I have to tell you this story, because if I don't, you're going to get mad at me. Well, I was an infant. This was in 1970-something, when I was an infant. And Mom and Dad was a preaching student, Memphis School of Preaching. And there was one of the members, he was preaching at a little congregation in Arkansas. And so on Saturday, they had invited Mom and Dad, and I guess by extension me. Of course, I was just a few months old, and to a fair or craft show or something of that nature. And so we went to this craft fair, and one of the elders there, the congregation, who apparently we were staying with, he was a craftsman, and he had taken a wine barrel and had made a bassinet and lined it with velvet and things like that. And so he took that bassinet, and he took that wine casket, chopped it off or whatever, and made a bassinet out of it and put it on a rocker or whatever, and was going to sell it. Now, this is in the 70s, okay? And times were actually pretty rough, actually. Money was very hard to come by, especially Arkansas, okay? And he was selling this for $300. Yeah. Anyway, so I got fussy. Imagine that. I got fussy, and Mom put me in the bassinet. And she was rocking me, and I fell asleep. And so they went on and did whatever. Well, a lady comes up, and she thought that I was a doll. And then apparently I moved or something. And she said, oh, that's not a doll, that's a real baby. And she bought the bassinet. Bought the bassinet for her grandson. So see how good of a salesman I am? I just had to tell you that story. Sometimes that happens though, doesn't it? Here's Pharaoh's daughter. She sees this baby in this ark of bulrushes, and her heartstrings go out. I can do something. That basically is what Pharaoh's daughter is telling herself. I can do something about this little one. And she does. She takes it upon herself then to care for this child. Now, God's still in this. God's still in this. So we have personal decisions. The personal decision by Amram and Jochebed to save their little boy. Personal decision. Personal decision to hide this child and to, make this ark of bulrushes. Personal decision. Personal decision to come and to save this little one. And for Miriam to be watching. But it is God's workings that all these things came together to the salvation of one individual, because God's not looking to this one individual, Moses. He's trying to save a whole nation. That is what he is accomplishing. But he is accomplishing it through all of these personal decisions that we call providence. So when Miriam saw that Pharaoh's daughter had opened it, she had compassion. Then said his sister, verse 7, to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go call a nurse of the Hebrew women that she may nurse the child for thee? Oh, that's a good idea. And so Pharaoh's daughter says, oh yes, that's an excellent idea. Would you go and get someone of the Hebrew women to nurse this little baby for me? And so who did she go get? She went and got Mama. And so she brought her into Pharaoh's daughter's dwelling place. And Jochebed took her child and she nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And Pharaoh's daughter, verse 10, called his name Moses, which means to draw out. So what a great picture this is, that this one little boy is drawn out of the water. And this is exactly what God is doing to the children of Israel, isn't he? He's drawing them out of Egypt. Now that's interesting also, because we have this same figure. The same figure in what? Where do we have the same figure? Not the same. No. Much later. New Testament. Think New Testament. We're drawing something out. Did somebody say, I will draw? Who said that? And I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. Didn't Jesus say that? You see the drawing there? Here's a group of people. Here's a person, Moses. Here's a group of people, the nation of Israel, and they're all being drawn out. The Christian is the exact same way. Jesus sees each of us individuals. He says, I'm going to draw you out. Now, he draws us out of what body of water? What body of water does he draw us out of? He draws us up out of baptism to walk in newness of life. But then he adds us to those drawn out or called out ones. The Greek word there is ekklesia, to call out. Now, that's translated as what word in the English? That's exactly right, Ricardo. The English word for that is church, the called out ones. You see, it's all a drawing out. We're going to draw you out of the world. So the individual Christian is drawn up out of the water, just like Moses was. But then the nation is drawn out of Egypt, just like the church is drawn out of the world. You see how it goes hand in hand? So that's what we always have to keep thinking of is, okay, this is the Old Testament. This doesn't make any sense, Lord. It does make sense when you equate what's going on in the Old Testament to what God is going to do in the New Testament in the spiritual realm. What happened to them physically happens to us spiritually. And so you have to make that link. Moses was drawn out. The nation of Israel is drawn out. The same thing happens to us spiritually today. We can't miss that. Okay. So Pharaoh's daughter drew him out. Of course, well, let's go back to our study here as well, because I skipped over a little bit. That's all right. How anticipated, that is, how was Moses anticipated in his preparation here? All down through history, the enemy of God's people have used death in trying to interrupt divine action. So Pharaoh was trying to kill all of the Hebrew boys, and yet God used birth of a boy as the occasion to bring his people home. Have there been Christians to die for the Lord? Absolutely. Beginning all the way back with Acts chapter 7, Stephen. God's people have been persecuted really from the very beginning. Of course, he has Abel here in Genesis chapter 4. He was righteous. He offered the right kind of sacrifice. And his brother Cain hated him for it, and so he murdered him. By the way, isn't it interesting? I don't know, it's just an observation. Isn't it interesting that some factions of people, when they get upset, they tend to violence and murder? And then another faction gets upset and they go about trying to change the world instead of violence and murder. I don't know, it's an observation. Just think about it. But we see it all through history. It's nothing new. It's nothing new. It has always occurred. So I would suggest that we look at that and say, hey, I want to be some of those who, when we get upset, we want to change the world and make it a better place instead of getting angry and resorting to violence. I think that's perfectly legitimate thing to do and think about. Matthew chapter 2, of course, Herod, when he knew that the Lord had been born and the wise men came looking for the king, what did he do? He killed all of Rachel's children. That is, he went about murdering little boys 2 years of age and under, and many, many, many children died as a result. But of course, God was with, obviously, Joseph and Mary and the Lord, and sent them where, by the way? He sent them to Egypt. That's exactly right. Egypt plays a big part in the scriptures. Of course, the Sanhedrin and others conspired against the Lord well, we'll kill him, and then this little uprising, this little faction, they will go away. Did murdering any of God's servants, including the Lord Jesus Christ, did that do anything to disrupt God's plans? Nothing. It did zero. Because the thing is that when we are with the Lord's will is always done. Regardless of what my role in it is. Regardless of what anybody else does. God's will is always going to be done. Because he has the power to get his will done. So what does that say then? Just a side note. What does that say about people and the doctrine that the church is the Lord's plan B? The Jews basically failed him, and so he had to establish the church instead of returning to the earth. What about that doctrine? Which, by the way, most religious people hold to. You do know that, right? That the church is plan B. Most people hold to that. Most religious people hold to that today. They believe that God failed. Can God fail? That's ridiculous to even think about. It's ridiculous to think about. God never, he's just unable to fail. And so that if you have a doctrine that says that, well, God couldn't do it this way, so he had to do it this way. No. Whatever God wants to accomplish, that's exactly what he does. And he's able to accomplish it every single time. To perfection, too, by the way. To perfection. All right. Moses, Mrs. B, was named by Pharaoh's daughter, and he got the right preparation from his godly mother. So there's Miriam. She's in the right place at the right time. She talks to Pharaoh's daughter. Then she goes and gets her mother, which is obviously Moses' mother. And now Moses, even though he's going to be in Pharaoh's daughter, that's right. In her household, he still has the influence of his mother. Is there any way to understate the importance of the influence of a godly mother? Is there any way to do that? There is no way to underestimate and understate the importance of a godly mother. Because when Moses got older, we're going to see that he chose to be numbered with God's people instead of Pharaoh and the people of Egypt. Because he could have done that, couldn't he? Now I know, I think I saw it. I don't know, maybe I didn't even see it. But I know that there was a number of years ago, a little cartoon, Prince of Egypt. Maybe you saw that. I don't know if I saw that or not. But I know it's a title. And it's, of course, it's about Moses. Because indeed, he was a Prince of Egypt. He was. Because he was the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter. That would make him a prince. And yet, instead of aligning himself with Egypt, he decided, because of the influence of his mother, that I'm going to be aligned with God's people. And so she taught him about the Lord and God's ways. And that was very necessary. Lauren? No, no, definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah, you definitely are correct. This was she was trying to hide him and didn't know what else to do. So we're going to put him in the river. But she didn't, she also didn't necessarily leave it to chance either, because Miriam is watching. She is looking out for him. So, if there had been a situation where a crocodile came, no doubt Miriam would have jumped in and tried to save her little brother. Because, obviously they're wild animals. Hippopotamus, right? Those are fearsome animals, folks. Crocodiles, fearsome animals. So Egypt has a lot of snakes, things like that an infant has no defense against those things. And of course, people, the greatest fear and the biggest enemy. And so, that's interesting. So, yeah, I don't think that, that they put Moses in this basket and thought, hey, let's see if Pharaoh's daughter will come by. And they didn't know. They had no idea. They were relying on the Lord. They really and truly had great faith. And that's why they did what they did. And put it in the Lord's hands. And then he found the way to do those things. That's a great observation there. I really appreciate that. Pharaoh's daughter did not know that as she walked by the riverside, the weeping babe in the ark of bulrushes was yet to be Jehovah's instrument, nor that is Pharaoh's daughter, what her role was going to be in all of these things either. She had no idea. And of course, again, Moses was an infant. He didn't know anything. And the family didn't know anything either. They didn't know how these things were all going to work out. They were just doing the very, very best that they could.
Sorry, this is, I think this is fine.
Oh.
Just think about Miriam and how brave this little girl was.
Absolutely.
Pharaoh's daughter, who was told to kill all the firstborn. If she didn't do what she did, then Moses would not have had the influence of his mother.
That's right.
So her role was huge.
Her role is yet another situation where a role cannot be understated. It was big. And sisters, even big sisters, I doubt that it was Miriam's idea, hey, let me go watch the basket. Who told her to do that? Mom told her to do that. Okay? Mom said to do this. That's what she did. But then she went even a step further. And when Pharaoh's daughter and entourage found Moses, then she even stepped up in great faith. Would you like for one of the Hebrew ladies to nurse this little one for you? And so, she did, through great faith, then do those things. And so, part of that was Mom telling her, but then part of it also was her coming forward, and she wants to save her little brother.
She could have ran back home. Oh, Mom.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And how many would today do that very thing? Not step up and be bold enough to say, oh, I can help you out with this. But just, report back, if you will. But that's not what Miriam did. And obviously we are glad that she stepped up into that particular role. And that's really, really great. Then we have the preparation. And here's the thing, preparation takes a long time. And number two, of course, Moses needed to be prepared. The first 40 years was in the household of Pharaoh's daughter, and essentially in the household of Pharaoh. And during toward the end of that time, he noticed that his brethren, that is the Hebrew people, were being abused in their slavery. And as such, he came to the rescue of one of his brethren and killed an Egyptian who was abusing one of the Hebrew men. And as a result, did the people, now I don't know about that individual, but did the people in general, did they appreciate Moses stepping up and defending them? Did they like that? No, they didn't like that. Why are you doing this? So they would rather have been beaten, and maybe even beaten to death, than for Moses to stand up for them and to defend them. Because, again, when you think of it like that, they don't want things to be worse for them. And, it did get worse for them for a little while. It definitely did. Instead, they said, "Who made thee a prince and judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian?" Because Moses is now, trying to regulate between his brethren. And they rejected him. So he went to Midian. So as he was about 40 years old, he grew up in Pharaoh's house for 40 years. Then he fled after the situation with the Egyptian guard and also his brethren. And he spent 40 years in Midian, and of course had his family there, and began his family there at the end of Exodus chapter 2. And so for 80 years, he was preparing. He was going through life and going through the experiences of life. He felt like, and he knew to one degree or another, that he was to lead God's people, but he didn't know how he was to lead God's people. Most of the time, we think of, even today, and no doubt Moses did when he was a young man, just about 40 years old, that leadership is about taking the reins and forcing people into a particular scenario or situation or circumstance. And yet, that is not really the true picture of leadership. And Moses needed to understand that. Now, when God came to Moses in the burning bush and said, "Okay, now I need you to lead my people out of Egypt," I can't do it. He had already been defeated. And a good brother of mine has a saying, and so I've picked it up and I say it from time to time as well. Burnt chicken's afraid of fire. That's true. When we get burned by life, we hardly ever go back to what it is, because and a lot of times it is true. Okay, here's a scenario. I got burned that time. I'm not going to do that anymore. Okay, we think lesson learned. But there are also situations in life where we might get burned in life, and yet we still have to go and do it over and over and over again, regardless of what happens to us. Now, that's a difficult lesson. And Moses needed to learn that, okay, it's not leadership, it's not the fact that you're going to have these people come out, it's how you lead. It's not by force, but it's going to be by example and authority. Not lording over the people, but showing them, this is how you obey the Lord. This is how you need to go. And by being that example, he was able to lead them out of Egyptian bondage. All right, one more comment, and then we'll be done for this morning.
The thing that it reminds me of is the saying, if the horse bucks you off, you get right back on it.
Yeah.
That'll teach you how to keep
Persevering, absolutely. There are many things that we need just good old perseverance. And, you know, sometimes being stubborn is not a good thing. And then there are some certain situations where we need a little bit of stubbornness, and maybe even a lot of stubbornness, especially when it comes to doing that which is right. Let's be stubborn about doing right. Appreciate the comments and your kind attention this morning. We're going to take a short break at the top of the hour, come back and worship our God together. So grateful to have you here with us this morning.